Good Sunday morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for First News Forum. I'm Daniel Armbruster. Joining me this morning, Senator Jay Paul Gumm of Durant. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Daniel.
And we're going to get right into, we have a lot of topics to talk about. First thing, top 10 best or 10 best, yeah, for the Senate, 5 for the Senate. You did really well this year, I guess.
Well, it's a nice honor. Every year, the Oklahoma Observer, an opinion paper in the state of Oklahoma, judges what it considers to be its 10 best and 10 worst legislators, 5 each in the House and Senate. And I was listed on there as one of the 5 best senators, primarily for my work with children with autism. And the reason I got the honor this year is we had a pretty good victory. It was called the Autism Parity Measure. What we have seen from a lot of these families that I've worked with for a lot of years on Nick's Law relating to autism is that if you have a child who has a diagnosis of autism, they'll get claims denied on illnesses and injuries that aren't directly related to autism. What the insurance companies have said is, well, a child with autism is more likely to break a bone or have a digestive disorder, so therefore it's related to autism, and in Oklahoma you're not required to cover anything relating to autism under a health insurance policy, so they deny the claim. What we were able to pass this year, we tucked a provision into a bill that said essentially if you're going to cover a child who has health insurance, who doesn't have a diagnosis of autism for a broken bone, digestive disorder, any illness or injury, you're going to cover that very same illness and injury on a child who does have a diagnosis of autism. Autism parity, it makes it fair for those families, and it was a big step forward, I think, because a lot of these families who have children with autism are stepping up and they're buying the health insurance. And what this really does is make sure that that health insurance gives them the same rights under that policy as a family who has a child who doesn't have autism.
When you go to these the town hall meetings and stuff, I know you attend a lot of these. What are the constituents? What do they say about this?
I've not run into any of my constituents who have had any opposition to Nick's Law at all. They believe it's a matter of simple fairness. And what Nick's Law would do is require health insurance policies in the state of Oklahoma to cover early diagnosis and treatment of autism in children. In essence, making sure that health insurance works for these families after they pay those premiums. Oklahoma is now almost in the minority of states that doesn't have some provision like this. Texas has had a law on the books now for 3 years, I believe it is.
Why do you think that is?
Well, there's a lot of opposition from a philosophical standpoint of telling an insurance company what it must do, telling a private business what it must do. But insurance is kind of a special circumstance. It's a special product. It's not like a widget on the shelf at your local retailer. It is something that will have a direct effect on a family's livelihood, on their lives, on their ability to care for their children. And there are certain things that ought to be covered. And when you've got a child who has autism, it is a bioneurological disorder. It is a healthcare issue. And we've seen study after study that tells us if we help these children early with applied behavioral analysis therapy, we can give them the best opportunity to reach their full potential and have a full and happy life.
Would you call that discrimination based on the insurance company's behalf? Or?
Absolutely, it is discrimination against these children and their families, and it really is a shameful situation, and it's a tragic situation. When you see these children, you know, it's like there's a window in their lives, and the older they get, the smaller that window becomes until it finally shuts, and they're never going to get any better than they are. But if you diagnose the autism early and you get them the ABA therapies early, they have a chance to become, in almost every case, fully functional. Now, it is a spectrum disorder. You have some that are very badly afflicted and some not so much. So it really, those at the far end, the very deeply affected, is harder to get to, and those are the ones that's even more important to reach early.
Okay, another topic in the national media right now, oil. We've had the Gulf oil spill. T. Boone Pickens says this is a time to bring in natural gas. And I know you've said before, Oklahoma has an abundance of natural gas. What is your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, it's a time to begin to focus on natural gas. And here's the thing, when I was co-chair of the Senate Energy Committee, we did a study on how much natural gas we have in the state of Oklahoma. And with the new ability to discover natural gas, we right now today have more known reserves of natural gas in the state of Oklahoma than any time in our history. That's after 100 years of using natural gas. So there's an abundant supply of it there. It really drives our economy well when you have a lot of natural gas production in a state, and it's clean burning, it's abundant, and it's domestic. We're not having to buy it from countries that want to kill us.
Right.
So I think Mr. Pickens is right on the beam here. The tragedy down in the Gulf gives us another example of why natural gas could and should be a critical component of our transportation fuel infrastructure needs. I'm a big believer that the more of that we pull out of Oklahoma's ground, first of all, you know, it's going to be a stronger economy. It's going to put money in communities' pockets, and it's going to put money in the state treasury. Even this week, we got revenue figures for the last month, which were actually above what the projections were going to be, driven primarily because increased activity in the gross production tax, because the price of natural gas is beginning to tick up a little bit. With
all that, why do you think it's so difficult to make that switch for not just Oklahoma but the entire country?
Well, sometimes change is very difficult, and you can retool an engine to operate off natural gas. Mr. Pickens gives a very eloquent description how you can set up a fill station in your own house, but they're kind of expensive. And so until that price comes down, or there's a way to use tax policy to make it more cost effective, it's going to be hard for the average family to do. But he's on the right track. We have in the United States a 60-year supply of natural gas, even at increased consumption levels. It makes perfect sense for us to continue to do our best to advocate the use of it, especially the use of it here in Oklahoma. And of course, Texas has a large field as well in the Barnett Shale and a couple of other shale formations that are now being discovered. This would be good for our economies. It would be good for our national security. And again, I think Mr. Pickens is right on the right track.
What about wind energy?
Wind energy is important as well. What our biggest challenge there comes from the fact that we do not have the transmission lines in the wind corridor, which basically runs from West Texas through western Oklahoma, goes up through western Kansas, Nebraska.
You have the wind, just
you have the wind.
Yeah.
You can put the wind farms out there, but you've got to have increased transmission lines to get the energy from those turbines into the grid. And that's something that's we've worked on in the state of Oklahoma, to try to find a way to encourage getting those transmission lines built, and something I'm going to continue to work toward.
Okay, two recent controversial topics: Point Vista, the development there at Lake Texoma State Park, and also Sardis Lake. We'll talk about those when we come back, all right?
You bet.
Stay with us. More First News Forum right after this.